x to the 6th power is really x 6 times. We can abbreviate x 6 times as x to the 6th power. Now if we want to evaluate that when x equals 2, evaluate means get the answer. So I want to evaluate x to the 6th power when x equals 2. So I'm going to take 2 and raise it to the 6th power. Now I could take 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, or I'm going to take my calculator and take 2, and I'm going to use this little button that means raise to the 6th power. Now I also want to evaluate when x equals negative 2. So I want to plug in negative 2 for x and get my answer. That's what evaluate means. So I'm going to take negative 2 and plug it in for x and get my answer. Notice that I put negative 2 in parentheses. Negative 2 to the 6th power is really negative 2 times 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 negative 2. And if I have a negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times, my answer is going to be positive. Because these two will give me a positive, and these two will give me a positive, and these two will give me a positive. So my overall answer will be positive. Be careful. Many of you will type this into your calculator. When I have this, I really have 2 to the 6th power, which is 64, and then the opposite of that answer. When I don't have negative 2 in parentheses, your calculator will follow the order of operations, which says do exponents first. So your calculator will take 2 to the 6th power, and then it will take multiplication, the opposite of that answer. We want to evaluate when x is negative 2. So we want to make sure that negative 2 gets put into parentheses. 64 is the correct answer. Now, what happens if I had negative 2 to the 5th power? Well, negative 2 to the 5th power is negative 32. So how come I got a negative answer here? Well, if I only have 5 x's, I only have negative 2 to the 5th power, I'm going to have one extra negative sign. So negative 2 to the 5th power, because 5 is odd, I'm going to get a negative answer. Let's look at this second example. Evaluate when x is 4 and y is negative 2. Evaluate means get the answer. So I want to take this, plug in 4, plug in negative 2, and get the answer. Now in order to evaluate, I need to follow the order of operations. To follow the order of operations, I'm going to take this problem one step at a time. Notice that all I did was plug in 4 for x and negative 2 for y. I haven't done any math yet. Now the order of operations says do what's inside the parentheses first. I'm going to work on this part right here. So I'm going to keep this 4 out front. I'm going to keep the parenthesis. I'm going to keep this parenthesis, and I'm going to keep the squared. So I really have inside the parentheses 4 minus 2 times negative 2. Well, 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, and I'm going to subtract negative 4. Well, subtracting negative 4 is really adding 4. And in my denominator, I get 2. Now here's where I need to be careful. The order of operations says keep going with the parentheses. Before I can do anything else, I'm going to add 4 plus 4 and get 8. Next in the order of operations, after I've taken care of grouping symbols, I take care of exponents and radicals. So before I can take 4 times 8, I need to take 8 squared. And 8 squared is 64. Now at this point, I have multiplication and division. And multiplication and division are on the same level. So it doesn't matter what order I do the multiplication and division in. In fact, I'm going to take this 4 and this 2 and lower it down to 2 over 1. So I really have 2 times 64, which I can do in my head. 2 times 64 is 128. In order to evaluate, make sure you're following that order of operations. And the last example, simplify. Simplify means combine all like terms. Evaluate means get the answer. Simplify means combine like terms. So my like terms in this problem are this x squared and this x squared, and this x and this x. Before I can simplify, I do need to distribute. So I'm going to distribute this 8 first. So I have 8x squared minus 8x. And then I'm going to distribute this 2. But it's not just any 2. This is really plus negative 2. So I'm going to distribute a negative 2. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. And negative 2 times negative x squared gives me positive 2x squared. So now I can combine my like terms. I have a grand total of 10 x squareds and negative 10 x's.